I stood in Richard's mother's living room, watching my sister-in-law Jessica wave my dealer license application in the air like a victory flag, and felt the strangest sense of déjà vu. No, not déjà vu. Memory. Come on, Maya. Jessica purred, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the marble coffee table. You're not even using it. You work at that sad little credit union. What do you need a dealer license for? I'd heard these exact words before. 6 years ago, or 6 years from now, depending on how you counted, I'd sat in this same room, on this same cream leather sofa, and let them convince me. Let them bully me, let them destroy my entire life. Then I died in a car accident at 34, broke and alone, my credit ruined, my career in shambles, facing federal fraud charges because of what Jessica had done with my license. And then I'd woken up in my 28-year-old body 3 days before this exact conversation. I applied for it because I was considering a career change, I said carefully, watching Jessica's expression. She was beautiful in that calculated way. Highlighted hair, designer athleisure, the kind of woman who'd never worked a real day in her life, but somehow always had money. Richard's younger sister, the golden child who could do no wrong. A career change? Richard laughed from his position by the window. My husband. The man I'd loved desperately in my first life. The man who'd signed the divorce papers without even looking at me after Jessica's scheme fell apart, and I took the blame. Babe, you don't know anything about cars. That's why I got the license, I said. To learn. Well, now you don't have to. Richard's mother, Patricia, set down her wineglass with a decisive click. Jessica needs it more. She's found an opportunity. An opportunity? That's what they'd called it last time, too. The opportunity was a shell game. Jessica had connected with a group running a car flipping scheme. Buying salvage vehicles, giving them superficial repairs, and selling them to unsuspecting buyers using fraudulent titles. They needed someone with a clean dealer license to process the paperwork, someone naive enough to trust family. In my first life, I'd been that someone. What kind of opportunity? I asked, though I already knew. Jessica's eyes gleamed. There's this guy, Marcus Chen, who has access to auction vehicles, really good deals. But he needs a licensed dealer to handle the transactions legally. It's completely above board, she added quickly. I just don't have my own license yet, and the application process takes forever. 6 months, I said. The application process takes 6 months. Exactly, Jessica leaned forward. But you already have yours. We're family, Maya. This would help me get started in the business, and once I get my own license, I'll take over everything. You wouldn't have to do anything. I'd handle all the actual work. That was the hook. The promise that I wouldn't have to do anything. In reality, Jessica would use my license to process over 200 vehicles in 18 months. Vehicles with forged titles, rolled back odometers, hidden flood damage. When the state investigated, every single transaction would be tied to my license number. My name, my responsibility. Patricia cleared her throat. Maya, dear, this is important for Jessica's future. You know she's been struggling to find her path. This could be her big break. Jessica was 32. She'd been finding her path for a decade, funded entirely by Patricia's money and Richard's spineless enabling. I don't know, I said slowly. Using someone else's dealer license is actually illegal in most cases. If something went wrong, nothing will go wrong, Jessica snapped, the sweetness cracking. God, why are you being so selfish? I'm literally asking for help from my own family. You're not her family, I said quietly. I am. Your brother's wife, Teb. Jessica's. Face flushed. That's what I meant. We're all family here. Richard moved behind the sofa, putting his hands on my shoulders. Maya, come on. Don't be like this. Jess really needs this. I looked up at my husband. In my first life, I'd craved his approval so desperately. I'd been an orphan, raised in foster care, no family of my own. When Richard's wealthy, established family had accepted me, I'd thought I'd finally found where I belonged. I'd been so wrong. What do I get out of it? I asked. The room went silent. What do you get out of it? Patricia's voice was ice. Yes. I met her gaze steadily. Jessica wants to use my professional license for her business venture. That's my credential, my liability, my responsibility. What's my compensation? Jessica's mouth fell open. Compensation? I'm your sister-in-law. And this is a business arrangement? I said. If it's legitimate and above board like you say, then there should be a contract. Terms. Insurance requirements. Liability protection. Richard's hands tightened on my shoulders. Maya, you're being ridiculous. This is family. We don't need contracts. Oh, but we did. In my first life, when the DMV investigation started, there'd been nothing in writing. No proof that Jessica was the one actually running the operation. No evidence that I'd objected or set boundaries. Just my signature on every single fraudulent transaction. My license number on every forged title. The investigators had looked at me, a credit union employee with no car expertise, and seen exactly what they were supposed to see. A criminal running a sophisticated fraud scheme. I need a lawyer to review any arrangement, I said firmly. A lawyer? Patricia stood abruptly. That's insulting. You're saying you don't trust us. I'm saying this is a significant legal and financial responsibility, and I need to protect myself. Protect yourself? Jessica's voice rose. From what? From your own family? Jesus, Richard, is this really who you married? Someone who'd throw legal bullshit in our faces instead of helping her own sister? Sister-in-law? I corrected again. Jessica grabbed her purse. Forget it. I'll find someone else who actually cares about family. She stormed toward the door, and I felt Richard's hands leave my shoulders. He followed her, murmuring something soothing. Patricia stared at me with pure contempt. You've disappointed me, Maya, she said coldly. I thought Richard had married better than this. Then she left too, leaving me alone in the vast, cold living room. I counted to 60. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Jessica. I'm sorry. You're right. I was being paranoid. Let's talk tomorrow. The reply came in 30 seconds. Finally, yes. Come to my apartment at 10 a.m. I smiled. In my first life, I'd caved immediately, desperate to repair the relationship. I'd signed whatever Jessica put in front of me, no questions asked. This time would be different. This time I had a plan. Jessica's apartment was in a luxury high-rise downtown, paid for by monthly checks from Patricia. I arrived at 10 a.m. sharp with a folder under my arm. There's my favorite sister-in-law. Jessica opened the door with a brilliant smile, all trace of last night's anger gone. Come in, come in. I made coffee. The apartment was pristine and impersonal, decorated by someone who'd watched too many home design shows. Jessica guided me to the kitchen island where 2 steaming mugs waited. Listen, she said, sliding onto a bar stool. I'm sorry about yesterday. I know I got emotional. This opportunity just means so much to me, you know? I finally found something I'm passionate about. Cars. Jessica was passionate about cars. The woman who'd once called Tepo A because she didn't know how to open her hood. I understand, I said. And I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have brought up lawyers and contracts. That was cold. Jessica's relief was palpable. Right? We're family. We trust each other. Exactly. I pulled out my folder. So I did some research last night about how to properly share a dealer license. And it turns out there actually is a legal way to do it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Oh? Yeah, I can add you as an authorized agent on my license. It's a simple form with the DMV. That way you can legally act on behalf of my dealership, and everything's above board. This was true. It was also a trap. See, when you added an authorized agent to a dealer license, that person could indeed conduct transactions. But there was a catch. The DMV tracked all activity under that license, and they tracked it by individual. If an authorized agent committed violations, those violations were tied to both the license holder and the specific agent who committed them. In my first life, Jessica had used my license without any official designation. She'd simply forged my signature on documents, used my license number, and conducted deals as if she were me. When the DMV investigated, they couldn't separate her actions from mine because officially, I was the only one authorized to use that license. This time, Jessica would be on record. Every single transaction she made would have her name attached as the authorized agent. That's perfect, Jessica beamed. See, you're so smart. This is exactly what we need. There's just one thing. I said, pulling out the form. As an authorized agent, you'll need to complete a background check and provide some documentation. Proof of identity, financial disclosure, that kind of thing. Financial disclosure? Standard procedure. The DMV wants to make sure authorized agents have clean financial records. It's to prevent fraud. I kept my voice casual, sympathetic even. Is that going to be a problem? Jessica's smile tightened. No, of course not. I just think it's ridiculous that they need all that information. I know, but that's the government for you. I knew exactly why Jessica looked uncomfortable. In my first life, I'd eventually learned that she had a spending problem. Credit card debt, bounced checks, a previous business venture that had ended with angry creditors. Nothing that would disqualify her from being an authorized agent, but enough to make her nervous about disclosure. Well, whatever, Jessica said finally. Let's do it. When can we start? As soon as the DMV processes the paperwork, usually takes about 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Her face fell. Marcus said he has vehicles available now, like this week. I can still process transactions for you, I said quickly. You just bring me the paperwork, I review it and sign it, and we're good to go. Once you're officially added as an agent, you can handle everything yourself. This was the crucial part. I needed Jessica to commit some violations under my watch, enough to establish a pattern before she was officially designated. That way, when the investigation came, there'd be a clear timeline. Violations committed while she was unauthorized, then her authorization, then more violations under her own name. It would paint a perfect picture of someone who'd manipulated a naive license holder, gotten caught, and was officially added in a failed attempt to legitimize an already corrupt operation. Okay, Jessica said slowly. That works. So I'll bring you the first deal today? Sure. She practically vibrated with excitement. This is going to be amazing, Maya. You're really helping me build something here. I won't forget this. She wouldn't, but not in the way she thought. The first vehicle was a 2018 Honda Accord with 45,000 miles on the odometer. The paperwork looked clean at first glance. Auction receipt, title, basic inspection report. Marcus got it from an insurance auction, Jessica explained, hovering over my shoulder at my dining room table that evening. Minor front-end damage, already repaired. We're selling it for $15,000, which is a steal for that model year. Examined the title carefully. It listed the vehicle as having a clean history, no salvage designation. That was the first lie. I pulled out my laptop and ran the VIN through a vehicle history service I'd subscribed to, something I hadn't known existed in my first life. The report loaded, and there it was. The Accord had been totaled in a flood 2 years ago, rebuilt, and given a washed title by passing it through states with lax title regulations. This title isn't clean, I said quietly. Jessica stiffened. What do you mean? The vehicle was flood damaged. Someone's hidden it by transferring the title through multiple states. This is title washing. It's fraud. Marcus wouldn't. Marcus absolutely would. I turned the laptop so she could see the report. Look, totaled in Louisiana, transferred to Texas, then to Oklahoma, each state removing more damage history until it shows up here with a clean title. Jessica's face went through several expressions: shock, calculation, defiance. So, nobody's going to check that deep, and it's already repaired. The car runs fine. Jessica, this is illegal. If I sign off on this deal with a clean title when I know it's fraudulent, I could lose my license. We could face criminal charges. You're being paranoid again. No, I'm being responsible. I closed the laptop. I can't process this transaction. She stared at me for a long moment. Then her expression shifted into something ugly. You know what? I knew you'd do this. I told Richard you'd find some excuse to back out. I'm not backing out. I'm refusing to commit fraud. It's not fraud. It's business. This is how the used car industry works, Maya. Everyone does stuff like this. You're just too much of a scared little rule follower to see the opportunity. The contempt in her voice was familiar. In my first life, she'd used that same tone when she'd needed me to sign something questionable, making me feel stupid and naive for hesitating. Then find another dealer to work with, I said calmly. Jessica grabbed the paperwork and shoved it back in her bag. Fine, I will. And when I'm making 6 figures from this business, Don't come crying to me for help." She slammed out of my apartment. I sat in the silence, heart pounding. Then I opened my laptop and saved the vehicle history report with detailed notes about the date, time, and Jessica's attempt to get me to process a fraudulent title. Documentation, evidence, insurance. Everything I hadn't had before. Jessica didn't call me for 3 days. Richard did, though. "What the hell, Maya?" he demanded when I picked up. "Jess called me crying. She said you backed out of helping her and accused her partner of being a criminal." I didn't back out. I refused to process a fraudulent vehicle title. She said it was fine. Marcus is a professional. He's been doing this for years. Exactly. He's been committing title fraud for years, and he's looking for a new dealer to use as a front because his previous connections probably got caught. Richard was silent for a moment. "You don't know that." I ran the VIN. The vehicle was flood damaged and the title was washed. That's a fact, not an opinion. So what? Jessica said the car runs fine. Someone's going to buy it and be happy with it. Where's the harm? I closed my eyes. This was the Richard I'd forgotten during my grief-stricken memories of our marriage. The Richard who always sided with his family, who saw ethical concerns as inconvenient obstacles rather than moral boundaries. "The harm is that it's illegal," I said. "And when the buyer discovers the fraud, or when the car fails in some way related to the flood damage, they'll have legal recourse against me, the dealer of record." Jessica said she'd handle any complaints. "With what money, Richard? Jessica doesn't have any money. Your mother pays her rent." "That's not—" He stopped. "That's not the point. The point is, you're being selfish and paranoid, and you're ruining an opportunity for my sister. Then let your mother co-sign on Jessica's business loans. Or you do it. Put your own credit and liability on the line for this opportunity." "That's different." "How?" "Because you're her sister-in-law. You're supposed to support family." "I am supporting family," I said quietly. "I'm protecting my husband from being married to a federal fraud defendant. You're welcome." I hung up before he could respond. My phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then again, voicemail, 12 times over the next hour, alternating between Richard and Jessica's numbers. Finally, a text from Patricia. "Family dinner tomorrow, 6 p.m. Don't embarrass Richard by refusing." I stared at the message, remembering the last family dinner from my previous life. The one where they'd browbeaten me for 3 hours until I'd agreed to sign whatever Jessica wanted. "I'll be there," I texted back. Then I called my own lawyer. Martin Reeves had been my attorney in my first life, hired too late to save me from the fraud charges. He'd been one of the few people who'd believed I was innocent, who'd fought for me even when I couldn't pay his bills. In this life, I'd looked him up a month ago, right after the rebirth. Retained him on a different matter, a simple will preparation, just to establish a relationship. "Maya," he answered warmly. "Good to hear from you. What's going on?" I explained the situation with Jessica, the dealer license, the fraudulent title. He listened without interrupting. "Do you have documentation of the fraud attempt?" he asked when I finished. "Yes. Vehicle history report, my notes from the conversation, text messages." "Good. And you refuse to process the transaction?" "Yes." "Even better." He paused. "Maya, I'm going to be blunt. It sounds like your in-laws are trying to use you as a liability shield for what could be a significant criminal enterprise. If you let Jessica use your license, you could be looking at fraud charges, DMV sanctions, even federal prosecution if vehicles cross state lines." "I know. I did know. I'd lived it. What do you want to do?" "I want to protect myself. Legally. But I also—" I hesitated. "I don't want to blow up my marriage if I don't have to." That was a lie. I knew the marriage was already over. Richard had shown me his priorities when he'd called me selfish for refusing to commit fraud. But I needed him to think we still had a chance. Needed to maintain the appearance of trying to make it work. Because I needed to be in position for what came next. "Then, here's what we do," Martin said. "Tomorrow, before this family dinner, you sign an affidavit documenting everything that's happened so far. The pressure to share your license, the fraudulent title, all of it. I'll keep it on file. If this situation escalates, if they pressure you further, if Jessica tries to forge your signature, anything. We have a contemporaneous record that you objected and tried to prevent illegal activity. Okay. And Maya, don't sign anything they put in front of you tomorrow. Nothing. No matter what they say. I won't. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and let myself feel it. The fear, the anger, the grief for a marriage that had never been what I thought it was. Then I pushed it aside. I had work to do. Patricia's house was lit up like a hotel when I arrived, every window glowing warm against the early evening darkness. I parked my modest Toyota next to Richard's BMW and Jessica's Mercedes SUV, also paid for by Patricia, and took a breath before heading inside. The door opened before I could knock. Richard stood there, handsome in the casual, expensive way that had first attracted me. Designer jeans, tailored button-down, watch that cost more than my car. "Hey," he said quietly. "Thanks for coming." Of course. He didn't move to kiss me and didn't lean in. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms for 2 days, ever since the phone argument. Inside, Patricia had set the dining room table with her expensive china. Jessica was already seated, looking subdued. Patricia emerged from the kitchen with a bottle of wine. "Maya, dear, so glad you could make it." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Please sit." I took my usual seat across from Jessica. Richard sat at one end of the table, Patricia at the other, like a tribunal. Dinner was served by Patricia's housekeeper. Expensive steaks, roasted vegetables, artisan bread. We ate in tense silence for several minutes before Patricia set down her fork with a deliberate clink. "So," she said, "let's discuss this situation like adults." I waited. "Jessica has apologized for losing her temper," Patricia continued. "She understands that you had concerns about the vehicle transaction. However, she's found an alternative solution." Jessica pulled a folder from the bag at her feet. "I talked to Marcus, and he agreed to only bring me deals with completely clean paperwork. No more salvage titles, no more questionable histories, just regular used cars from reputable sources." She slid the folder across the table. Inside were documents for 3 vehicles: a Toyota Camry, a Ford F-150, and a Chevy Silverado. I scanned the paperwork quickly. It looked clean, almost too clean. "These are from a dealer auction in Kansas," Jessica said. "Marcus has a connection there. Everything's legitimate." I pulled out my phone and ran the VINs through my vehicle history app. All 3 came back clean. No flood damage, no salvage history, proper title documentation. "See?" Jessica's voice held a note of triumph. "I listened to your concerns. I fixed the problem. Can we move forward now?" I looked at the paperwork again, more carefully this time. The auction documentation looked legitimate. The titles were properly assigned. Everything seemed above board, which meant this was a test. Jessica wanted to establish a pattern of clean deals to get me comfortable, to make me feel like I'd been paranoid about the first vehicle. Then, once I was processing her transactions regularly, she'd start slipping in the fraudulent ones. It's what she'd done in my first life. "These look fine," I said slowly. Jessica's face lit up. "So you'll sign them?" "I'll process them through my dealership, yes. But we need to formalize this arrangement first." Patricia's expression hardened. "Formalize how?" "I need Jessica to apply to be an authorized agent on my dealer license. It's a simple DMV form. That way, once she's approved, she can handle transactions herself, and I'm just providing the license as a platform." "We've been over this," Richard said impatiently. "That takes 2 weeks. Which is why I'll handle these 3 vehicles personally while we wait for the approval." I met Jessica's eyes. "But no more after this unless you're properly authorized." "I'm not going to keep processing deals indefinitely, without proper legal structure." Jessica glanced at Patricia, who gave a tiny nod. "Fine," Jessica said. "I'll do the authorized agent thing. Can you bring me the forms tomorrow?" "I'll email them to you tonight." Patricia raised her wine glass. "Wonderful. I'm so glad we could resolve this as a family. Maya, I apologize if we seemed pushy. We're just excited about Jessica's new venture." "I understand." The rest of dinner passed in forced pleasantries. Richard's hand found mine under the table at one point, squeezing gently. I squeezed back, playing the role of reconciled wife. When I left 2 hours later, I had the paperwork for 3 vehicle transactions and a promise from Jessica to complete the authorized agent application. I drove home, parked in my apartment complex, and sat in the dark car for a long moment. Then I called Martin Reeves. I'm going to process 3 transactions for her, I told him. They look clean, but I need you to review the paperwork first. Bring it by tomorrow. And Martin, I need you to start documenting everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every time they pressure me. I need a paper trail that shows I tried to do this legally. You think this is going to blow up? I know it is. Because in my first life, the DMV investigation had started after an anonymous tip. Someone, I'd never found out who, had reported suspicious activity tied to my dealer license. The investigation had uncovered 200 fraudulent transactions over 18 months. This time, the investigation would start the same way, with an anonymous tip, but the tip would come from me. And when the DMV investigators looked into my license, they'd find a very different story. A dealer who'd tried to do everything by the book, who'd documented concerns about potential fraud, who'd required her sister-in-law to become an authorized agent specifically to create accountability. They'd find a victim, not a perpetrator. And Jessica? Jessica would be on record as the authorized agent for every single fraudulent transaction she committed. I processed the 3 vehicles over the next week. Martin reviewed each transaction and confirmed they were legitimate. I signed the paperwork, filed the titles with the DMV, and transferred the vehicles to the buyers Jessica had lined up. Everything was perfect. Clean, above board. Jessica was ecstatic. See how easy that was? She gushed over coffee at a cafe downtown. This is going to be amazing, Maya. Marcus has so many vehicles available. I'm projecting we could do 20, maybe 30 deals a month once we get into a rhythm. 20 to 30 deals a month, each one a potential fraud, each one tied to my license if I let this continue unchecked. That's ambitious, I said carefully. Have you submitted the authorized agent application yet? Her smile faltered. I'm working on it. The financial disclosure section is really invasive. They want bank statements, credit reports, all this personal information. It's standard for dealer licensing. It's annoying. She sipped her latte. But whatever, I'll get it done. Anyway, Marcus has 5 more vehicles ready. Can you handle them this week? Let me see the paperwork first. She slid another folder across the table. 5 vehicles this time, 2 Hondas, a Nissan, a Toyota, and a BMW. I opened the folder and felt my stomach tighten. The BMW's paperwork was wrong, subtly wrong, the kind of wrong that would slip past someone who didn't know what to look for. The title had been transferred through 3 states in rapid succession, always a red flag. The odometer reading seemed low for the vehicle's age, and the seller was listed as a private party, but the signature on the title assignment looked suspiciously like a dealer stamp. I need to research these, I said, closing the folder. Jessica's smile vanished. Are you serious? You're going to give me a hard time again? I'm going to do my due diligence. That BMW's paperwork raises questions. What questions? The title history looks suspicious. I want to run a full vehicle history before I sign anything. Jessica grabbed the folder back. You know what? Forget it. Marcus said I should just get my own license anyway. You're being way too uptight about this. Then get your own license. The application is online. You could submit it today. I'm not waiting 6 months to start my business. Then become my authorized agent like we agreed. The DMV can approve that in 2 weeks. We stared at each other across the table. Jessica's face was flushed, her hands tight around her coffee cup. I'm trying to build something here, she said finally. And you're supposed to be supporting me. That's what family does. Family doesn't ask family to commit fraud. It's not fraud. People at nearby tables were starting to stare. Jessica noticed, lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. You're just jealous that I'm actually doing something with my life instead of sitting in a credit union cubicle counting other people's money. The insult bounced off me. I'd heard worse from her in my previous life after everything fell apart. When I was facing criminal charges, and she'd told anyone who'd listen that I'd dragged her into my scheme. Submit the authorized agent application, I said calmly. Then we can continue. Those are my terms. Jessica stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I'm calling Richard. He needs to know how his wife is treating his sister. Go ahead. She stormed out, leaving her half-full latte behind. I sat in the cafe for a while longer, running VIN checks on the other 4 vehicles. 2 came back clean, 2 had hidden problems. One with a salvage history that had been washed, another with an odometer rollback. I documented everything, sent copies to Martin, and waited for the explosion. It came that night. Richard stormed into our apartment at 9 p.m., face red with fury. "You humiliated Jessica in public," he spat. "People heard you accuse her of fraud." I said family doesn't ask family to commit fraud. I didn't accuse her of anything. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. I was sitting on the couch, very calm, very still. "Richard, 2 of the 5 vehicles she wanted me to process today have fraudulent paperwork. Salvage titles that have been washed, odometer tampering. If I signed off on those deals, I'd be committing crimes." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I ran the VINs. I have the reports." "So what? Maybe Marcus made a mistake. Maybe the previous dealers made mistakes. That doesn't mean Jessica is trying to commit fraud." "Then why won't she submit the authorized agent application? If everything's legitimate, why is she avoiding the background check?" Richard faltered. Because it's invasive and unnecessary. She's my sister, Maya. We should be able to trust her." "Trust isn't the issue. Legal liability is." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "You're destroying her dream. Do you understand that? This is the first thing she's been excited about in years, and you're killing it with your paranoia. I'm protecting us both." "Protecting?" He laughed bitterly. "From what? From my family? Jesus, Maya, you really are as cold as my mother said." That stung, but I didn't let it show. What did Patricia say? That she's never seen someone so ungrateful. That she welcomed you into this family, even though you came from nothing, and this is how you repay her, by sabotaging Jessica. From nothing. The contempt in that phrase settled over me like a familiar coat. "I didn't come from nothing," I said quietly. "I came from foster care, from a childhood that taught me to be careful about who I trust. And right now those instincts are telling me that Jessica's business opportunity is not what she claims it is. Your instincts are wrong." "Are they? Then ask Jessica to show you the vehicle reports I ran. Ask her to explain why 2 of the vehicles have fraudulent titles." "I'm not going to interrogate my sister based on your paranoid—" "Then we're done talking about this." I stood up. "I'm not processing any more vehicles until Jessica is properly authorized. That's final." "Fine." Richard's voice went cold. "Then maybe we need to reconsider some things." "Like what?" "Like whether this marriage is working." There it was. The threat I'd been expecting. In my first life, this threat had terrified me. I'd agreed to anything to save the marriage. Not this time. "Maybe we do," I said. Richard stared at me, shocked. He'd expected me to cave, to apologize, to back down. "You don't mean that," he said. "Don't I?" We stood in our living room, the expensive furniture and tasteful decor that Patricia had helped us choose, and looked at each other like strangers. "I need some air," Richard finally said. He grabbed his keys and walked out. I stood alone in the silence, heart pounding but head clear. Then I pulled out my laptop and started drafting an email to the DMV's Fraud Investigation Unit. "I am writing to report suspicious activity related to my auto dealer license. License number DL847392. I have been approached by an individual who is attempting to use my license to process vehicles with potentially fraudulent titles." I didn't send it. Not yet. But I had it ready. Jessica submitted the authorized agent application 3 days later, 48 hours before the deadline I'd set. She dropped it off at my apartment without a word, just handed me the folder and left. I reviewed the paperwork carefully. She'd completed everything: the background check authorization, financial disclosure, proof of identity. Her credit report showed exactly what I'd expected: maxed out credit cards, past due accounts, a pattern of financial irresponsibility. Not disqualifying for the authorized agent designation, but concerning. I submitted the application to the DMV that afternoon with a cover letter explaining that Jessica would be conducting vehicle transactions on behalf of my dealership. Every word was chosen carefully, every phrase crafted to establish that this was her business. her deals, my license platform. The DMV sent a confirmation email. Application received, processing time 10 to 14 business days. Jessica called me an hour later. 2 weeks? Her voice was tight. I have to wait 2 fucking weeks? That's what they said. Marcus has a dozen vehicles ready to go. I'm going to lose all these deals because of bureaucratic bullshit. The DMV doesn't rush for anyone. Can't you, I don't know, call someone? Explain that it's urgent? It doesn't work that way. She was quiet for a moment. What if I bring you the deals and you just sign them? Like before. We can backdate the paperwork to make it look like I was already authorized. No. Maya? No. Jessica. That would be fraud, literal textbook fraud. Everything is fucking fraud with you, she exploded. Do you know how exhausting it is to deal with someone who's so obsessed with rules and procedures? This is business. Sometimes you have to bend things a little. I'm not bending anything. Then you're useless. She hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand, thinking about the dozen vehicles Marcus supposedly had ready. Vehicles that Jessica was eager to process immediately, before her background check cleared, before her name was officially on record. Vehicles that were almost certainly fraudulent. I opened my laptop and added a new paragraph to my draft email to the DMV. Following my initial refusal to process questionable transactions, the individual has now submitted an application to become an authorized agent on my license. However, she is pressuring me to process additional transactions before the application is approved and has suggested backdating paperwork to circumvent the authorization requirement. Still didn't send it. Not yet. A week passed. Richard was barely home, spending most nights at Patricia's house to give us space. Jessica stopped contacting me entirely. I went to work at the credit union, processed loan applications, and pretended everything was normal. Then, on day 8 of the DMV processing period, I got a text from an unknown number. Maya, this is Marcus Chen. Jessica gave me your number. I'd like to meet to discuss a business proposition. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I don't meet with people I don't know. If you have a business proposition related to vehicle sales, you can discuss it with Jessica once she's authorized on my license. This is time sensitive. I have opportunities that can't wait 2 more weeks. Then I suggest you find another dealer to work with. Jessica said you were difficult. She wasn't kidding. I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, Jessica called, screaming before I even said hello. You just blew off Marcus! Do you have any idea what you've done? He's connected, Maya. He has relationships with auction houses across 5 states, and you just insulted him. I didn't insult him. I told him to wait until you're properly authorized. He doesn't have time to wait. Jesus Christ, why are you like this? Jessica, I don't know Marcus. I don't know his business. I'm not meeting with a stranger to discuss using my dealer license for transactions I haven't reviewed. He's not a stranger. He's my business partner. You've known him for 3 weeks? So what? So that's not long enough to trust someone with something that could cost me my professional license and potentially land me in prison. You're insane. You know that? Actually paranoid. Richard is right about you. What did Richard say? That you've changed. That you used to be sweet and agreeable, and now you're cold and suspicious. That he doesn't even recognize you anymore. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Not because the words hurt. I'd heard them before, but because they confirmed what I already knew. Richard had never actually known me. He'd known the desperate foster kid who'd been so grateful to be accepted by his wealthy family that she'd molded herself into whatever they wanted. That version of me had died in a car accident at 34, alone and facing federal charges. Tell Richard I said that people change, I said. And sometimes change is growth. Change is divorce, Jessica spat. Keep this up and you're going to lose everything. She hung up. I sat in my apartment, looking at the life I'd built, the furniture Richard and I had chosen, the wedding photos on the wall, the shared Netflix account still logged in on the TV, and felt nothing but relief. Because Jessica was wrong. I wasn't going to lose everything. I already had. And I'd come back specifically to make sure it never happened again. The DMV approved Jessica's authorized agent application on day 12. I got the email at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, forwarded it to Jessica, and waited. She called within 5 minutes. Finally, okay, I'm bringing you paperwork for 15 vehicles tomorrow. Can you review them by Friday? 15? Marcus has been holding them. We need to move fast before someone else grabs them. I'll need the VIN numbers first so I can run history reports. Maya. Those are my terms, Jessica. VINs first, then I'll review the paperwork. She was quiet for a long moment. Fine, I'll email them to you tonight. The VINs arrived at 11 p.m. 15 vehicles, a mix of sedans, SUVs, and trucks. I ran each one through my vehicle history service. 7 came back clean, 8 had problems, 2 had salvage titles that had been washed through multi-state transfers, 3 had odometer rollbacks, 2 had been reported stolen at some point in their history, though later recovered. 1 had been in a serious accident that wasn't reflected on the title. I documented everything, took screenshots, saved the reports. Then I called Martin Reeves. She's finally showing her hand, I told him. More than half the vehicles are fraudulent. And she's now an authorized agent on your license? As of today. Perfect. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. If you process these transactions, you're both liable. But because she's the authorized agent actually conducting the deals, the DMV will focus their investigation on her. Especially if you have documentation that you flagged the problems and she ignored your concerns. I'm going to refuse to process them. Good. Do it in writing. Create a paper trail. I spent the next 2 hours crafting an email to Jessica. Professional, detailed, damning. Jessica, I've completed vehicle history reports for all 15 VINs you provided. Unfortunately, I cannot process 8 of these transactions due to significant issues with the vehicles' histories. I listed each vehicle, its VIN, and the specific problems. As the authorized agent on my dealer license, you are responsible for ensuring that all transactions are legitimate and comply with state and federal regulations. Processing vehicles with washed titles, odometer tampering, or undisclosed damage history would constitute fraud and could result in criminal charges, substantial fines, and loss of our dealer license. I am willing to process the 7 vehicles that have clean histories. For the remaining 8, I recommend you return them to Marcus or find another dealer willing to take on the legal liability. Please confirm your understanding of these terms. Best, Maya. I sent it at 1 a.m. Jessica's response came at 1:03 a.m. You've got to be fucking kidding me. At 1:15 a.m., do you know how much money Marcus has invested in these vehicles? You're going to cost him tens of thousands of dollars. At 1:22 a.m., I'm calling Patricia. This is beyond unreasonable. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The explosion came the next day. Patricia called me at work, her voice pure ice. Maya, I need you to come to my house tonight. We're having a family meeting. I have plans? Cancel them? This is non-negotiable. What's it about? Jessica's business and your marriage. 6 p.m. Be there. She hung up before I could respond. I sat at my desk in the credit union, surrounded by the familiar hum of mundane financial transactions, and made a decision. I forwarded every email, every document, every piece of evidence I'd collected to Martin Reeves with a simple note. If anything happens to me, give this to the DMV. Then I updated my draft email to the DMV fraud division with the latest information about the 15 vehicles and Jessica's furious response to my refusal. Then I drove to Patricia's house. They were all waiting. Patricia, Jessica, Richard, and, surprisingly, a man I didn't recognize. Late 40s, expensive suit, the kind of artificial tin that came from golf course hours. Maya, this is Marcus Chen, Patricia said. I thought it was time you two met properly. Marcus stood and offered his hand. His smile was smooth, practiced. Jessica's told me so much about you. I didn't take his hand. I'm sure she has. His smile dimmed slightly. He sat back down. Marcus has explained the situation, Patricia continued. These vehicles you're concerned about, the history issues, are simply misunderstandings. The auction houses sometimes make errors in their paperwork. It doesn't mean the vehicles are fraudulent. Auction houses don't wash titles through multiple states, I said. That's deliberate. Marcus leaned forward. Mrs. Hayes, I've been in the automotive business for 20 years. What you're seeing as red flags are actually just creative problem solving. When a vehicle has a salvage title, it's worth pennies on the dollar. But if that vehicle has been properly repaired and is safe to drive, Why should it carry that stigma? We're actually helping people get quality vehicles at prices they can afford by lying about their history, by giving them a second chance. His tone was patient, condescending. Think of it like this. Everyone deserves a fresh start, right? These cars are the same. They made mistakes, got in accidents, got flooded, but they've been fixed. They deserve fresh titles. The metaphor was so absurd I almost laughed. Cars aren't people, I said, and title washing is a federal crime. Marcus's smile vanished. I'm offering you an opportunity to make serious money, Mrs. Hayes. I have connections to move 50, maybe 100 vehicles a month through your license. At $1,000 per transaction, that's $50,000 to $100,000 a month in illegal proceeds, I finished. Until the DMV investigates, the federal government gets involved, and I spend the next 5 years in prison. That won't happen if you're smart about it. Being smart about it means not doing it at all. Patricia's wineglass hit the table with a sharp crack. Enough. Maya, you are being ridiculous. Marcus is a legitimate businessman who is offering you and Jessica an incredible opportunity. Your paranoid research and rule following are costing this family real money. I'm protecting this family from federal prosecution. You're sabotaging your sister-in-law out of jealousy. I don't have a sister-in-law anymore, I said quietly, looking at Richard. Do I? He wouldn't meet my eyes. This marriage is over, I said, more to myself than anyone else. It has been for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. Maya, Richard started. No. I stood up. You've made your choice. Your mother and sister over your wife. Your family's illegal business over basic ethics. That's fine. That's your right. But I'm not going to be part of it. Jessica jumped up. You can't just walk away. My name is on your dealer license now. I'm an authorized agent. Yes, I said. You are? Which means every transaction you process is tied to you personally. The DMV tracks violations by individual, Jessica. If you use my license to commit fraud, you'll face the consequences. Her face went pale. You did this on purpose. I did it legally. Everything by the book. Just like I told you from the beginning. Marcus stood slowly, his practiced smile gone. You're making a very big mistake, Mrs. Hayes. I have friends in this industry. You'll never work as a dealer again. Good thing I work at a credit union then. I walked out. Behind me, I heard Patricia's voice, shrill with fury. Richard, stop her! Don't let her just... But Richard didn't follow me. I drove home, packed a bag, and checked into a hotel. Then I sent the email to the DMV. The investigation started within 48 hours. I got a call from investigator Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, I confirmed, from the DMV's dealer fraud unit. So, Hayes, we received a complaint regarding suspicious activity on dealer license DL847392. Can you come in for an interview? Yes. When? Tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I'll be there. I called Martin Reeves. It's happening? Remember, he said, you're a victim in this. Someone approached you to use your license for illegal transactions. You tried to do everything correctly, required authorization, ran vehicle histories, refused suspicious deals. You're cooperating fully with the investigation. Because it's true. Yes, but it's also strategic. Don't volunteer information, but answer their questions honestly. You have nothing to hide. The interview room at the DMV was exactly as sterile and depressing as I remembered from my first life. But this time, I sat across from Investigator Chen with Martin beside me, not as a defendant, but as a complainant. Walk me through what happened, Chen said, pulling out a recorder. I did. Starting with Jessica's initial request, the family. Pressure, the first fraudulent vehicle, my requirement that she become an authorized agent, the escalating number of problematic transactions. Chen took notes, her expression neutral. And you have documentation of all this? Yes. Martin slid a folder across the table. Vehicle history reports, email correspondence, text messages, everything. Chen reviewed the documents for a long time. Then she looked up at me. Ms. Hayes, I have to ask, if you knew these transactions were fraudulent, why did you agree to let Jessica White become an authorized agent on your license? This was the crucial question, the one that could make me look complicit. I wanted to protect myself legally, I said carefully. I knew Jessica was going to pursue this business with or without my cooperation. If I'd refused entirely, she might have... I stopped, choosing my words carefully. She might have tried to use my license without my knowledge. By making her an authorized agent, I created an official record. Every transaction she processed would be tied to her name, not just mine. Chen's expression shifted. You were creating a paper trail? I was trying to ensure that if she did something illegal, there would be proof that it was her decision, not mine. Smart. Chen closed the folder. Based on what you've provided, I'm opening a formal investigation into Jessica White's activity as an authorized agent on your license. I'll need access to all transaction records. Of course. And Ms. Hayes, you should prepare for this to get ugly. When we start questioning the buyers of these vehicles, when we start tracing the money, your family's going to know where this investigation came from. They already know, I said. I walked out on my husband 3 days ago. Chen nodded. Then you know what's coming? I did, but this time I was ready. The investigation moved fast. Within a week, the DMV had identified 37 transactions processed under Jessica's name as an authorized agent. Of those, 23 involved vehicles with fraudulent titles, odometer tampering, or undisclosed damage. They suspended Jessica's authorization immediately. Then they started interviewing buyers, people who'd purchased cars they thought were clean, only to discover flood damage, accident history, mechanical problems that had been hidden. People who'd paid premium prices for vehicles worth a fraction of what they'd spent. The buyers were angry. Some filed complaints with the DMV, others hired lawyers. And all of them pointed to one name, Jessica White, authorized agent for dealer license DL847392. Jessica called me on day 9 of the investigation. I was in my hotel room, reviewing divorce paperwork Martin had drafted. You fucking bitch, she hissed when I answered. You set me up. No, I said calmly. You set yourself up. I gave you every opportunity to do this legally. You chose fraud. The DMV is saying I processed 23 fraudulent transactions. They're talking about criminal charges, Maya. Yes, that's what happens when you commit fraud. I didn't know. Marcus said everything was legitimate. You knew. I sent you vehicle history reports for every single problematic car. You chose to ignore them. She was crying now. Please, you have to tell them this was a mistake, that I didn't understand. I'm not lying to investigators for you, Jessica. Then they're going to charge me. The DMV investigator said I could face up to 3 years in prison. Then you should get a lawyer. With what money? I'm broke, Maya. And Richard says Patricia won't pay for a lawyer because this is my own fault. That surprised me. Patricia's not helping you? She says I should have listened to you, that I was stupid to work with Marcus, that I've embarrassed the family. Jessica's voice broke. Please, we're family. You have to help me. We're not family anymore, I said quietly. Richard served me with divorce papers yesterday. She was silent for a long moment. This is really happening. Yes, you're really going to let them charge me. I'm going to cooperate with their investigation. What happens to you is the consequence of your own choices. She hung up. I sat in the hotel room, feeling the weight of it settle. This was the revenge I'd come back for. The moment I'd been planning since I woke up in my 28-year-old body. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt necessary. The charges came 6 weeks later. The State Attorney General's office filed 23 counts of fraud against Jessica White and Marcus Chen. The charges included title washing, odometer tampering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Jessica was arrested at Patricia's house. The local news covered it. Minor story, but enough to humiliate the family. Marcus disappeared. Word was he'd fled to Mexico. Patricia called me once, her voice colder than I'd ever heard. I hope you're satisfied. I'm not, I said truthfully, but I'm safe. You destroyed this family. No, Jessica did that. I just refused to go down with her. She hung up. Richard never called. The divorce proceeded without drama. He didn't contest anything, didn't fight for assets. I think he was too ashamed. I moved out of the hotel and into a small apartment across town. Started working on my own dealer license applications. This time for a legitimate business. buying and selling clean vehicles to people who needed reliable transportation at fair prices. The DMV cleared my license after confirming I'd cooperated fully with the investigation. They commended me for the documentation I'd provided and suggested I consider consulting on dealer fraud prevention. I declined. I'd had enough of fraud for one lifetime. Jessica's trial was scheduled for 8 months out. Her public defender was arguing for a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Marcus, wherever he was. I wasn't following it closely. I'd moved on. 1 year after my rebirth, I stood in the parking lot of my new dealership, Second Chance Auto Sales. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. I had 12 vehicles on the lot. All clean titles, all thoroughly inspected, all priced fairly. I'd personally verified every history, checked every maintenance record. My first customer was a single mother with bad credit and 2 kids in the back of her beat-up sedan. She needed reliable transportation to get to her second job. I sold her a 2015 Honda Civic with 78,000 miles for $8,000. A fair price, maybe even generous. I personally drove her through the vehicle history, showed her the maintenance records, explained exactly what she was getting. When she started crying from relief, I thought about the buyers Jessica had defrauded. People just like this woman, desperate for reliable transportation, who'd been lied to and cheated. "Thank you," the woman said, hugging me. "Thank you for being honest." "That's the bare minimum," I said. "You deserve honesty." As I watched her drive off the lot, I pulled out my phone and checked the news. Jessica had taken a plea deal. 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, $250,000 in restitution to defrauded buyers. Marcus Chen had been arrested in Cabo San Lucas. Extradition pending. Patricia had cut Jessica off financially. The family was done enabling her, and Richard had posted on social media about learning hard lessons about trust and family. I didn't react, didn't comment, didn't reach out. I just went back inside my dealership and helped my next customer. 2 years after the rebirth, I sat in a DMV hearing room, watching as Jessica's dealer fraud conviction was used as a case study in a new training program for dealer license applicants. I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I'd been subpoenaed as an expert witness in another fraud case, a dealer in a similar scheme who'd claimed he didn't know his authorized agent was committing fraud. "Ms. Hayes," the administrative judge asked, "in your experience, is it possible for a license holder to be genuinely unaware of fraud committed by an authorized agent?" "It's possible," I said carefully, "but unlikely if the license holder does even basic due diligence. Vehicle history reports are easily accessible. Title problems are identifiable with minimal training. If someone is processing dozens of transactions and never checking the documentation, that's willful ignorance at best, complicity at worst." The defense attorney stood. "But Ms. Hayes, you yourself authorized Jessica White to use your license. Doesn't that make you complicit in her crimes?" "No," I said firmly, "because I required her to become an official, authorized agent, which created a paper trail. I ran vehicle history reports on every transaction and refused to process fraudulent deals. I documented my concerns and cooperated, fully with investigators. I did everything possible to operate legally while protecting myself from her illegal activity." "So you used her as what? A shield?" "I used proper legal procedures to establish clear boundaries and accountability. That's not a shield. That's responsible business practice." The judge nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Hayes, that's all." As I left the hearing room, I passed the defendant, a middle-aged man who looked terrified. He reminded me of myself in my first life, facing charges I didn't fully understand for crimes I'd been manipulated into. I felt a brief flash of sympathy, but only brief, because in my first life, I'd had an excuse. I'd been young, naive, desperate for family approval. This man was just greedy. 5 years after the rebirth, I got an unexpected visitor at my dealership. Jessica. She looked different. Older, harder. Prison had worn away the polished veneer, leaving someone more real, but more broken. "I'm not here to cause problems," she said quickly when I tensed. I wanted to talk. "I have customers. Please, just 5 minutes?" I gestured to my office. Small, cramped, but mine. Jessica sat across from my desk, looking around at the modest space. You're really doing this. The dealership. Yes. Are you successful? I'm profitable, sustainable, honest. She flinched at the last word. I'm working at a call center now. Telemarketing. It's the only job I could get with a felony record. I didn't respond. The parole officer says I need to make amends, part of my rehabilitation. She looked down at her hands. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say, you were right. About everything. Marcus was using me. The deals were fraudulent. I knew it deep down. I just didn't want to admit it. Why didn't you want to admit it? Because if I admitted the deals were bad, I'd have to admit I was failing again. That Patricia was right about me being useless. That Richard was right about me being a screw-up. She laughed bitterly. Turns out they were right anyway. I thought about my first life, how I'd been so desperate to belong to their family that I'd destroyed myself trying to please them. Patricia and Richard were wrong about a lot of things, I said quietly, but they were right that you needed to take responsibility for yourself, not your business ventures, yourself. I know that now. She stood. Anyway, I said what I came to say. I'm sorry, Maya, for all of it. You tried to protect me and I called you every name I could think of. You tried to destroy my life. I know. She met my eyes. I know, and you had every right to turn me in. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just sorry. She left. I sat in my office for a long time after, thinking about revenge and justice and redemption. The thing about coming back to life with knowledge of the future is that you think you're going to prevent tragedies, save people, fix mistakes. But some mistakes need to happen. Some people need to face consequences. And some tragedies are just justice. 10 years after the rebirth, I sold my dealership for a modest profit and retired from the car business entirely. I'd helped hundreds of people get reliable transportation. I'd never sold a fraudulent vehicle. I'd never cut corners, and I'd never trusted the wrong people again. Richard remarried. Patricia passed away. Jessica moved to another state, started over with a new name and a fresh start I secretly helped arrange. Because revenge is satisfying, but it's not everything. Sometimes after you've made someone face the consequences of their actions, you can choose mercy. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but mercy. I attended Patricia's funeral from a distance, watching Richard and his new wife comfort Jessica. They looked like a family again, smaller and sadder, but still connected. I felt nothing but relief that I wasn't part of it, because the real revenge wasn't destroying Jessica or divorcing Richard or cutting off Patricia. The real revenge was building a life I actually wanted, a life where I didn't need their approval, a life where I made my own choices, a life where, when someone said we're family, I knew enough to ask, what kind of family? The kind that supports each other or the kind that uses each other? I drove away from the funeral in my modest, reliable car, clean title, maintenance records, honest history, and headed home to my small apartment, my quiet life, my hard-won peace. They'd forced me to let her use my dealer license. After Rebirth, the DMV suspended it for her violations, and I walked away free.